All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our July Business Bites. I hope everyone is having a fantastic Wednesday so far, and I'm very excited to see everyone joining us today for another fantastic panel discussion. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Colin Summerhauser. I am the head of Haunted House in Palo Alto. Just as a quick background, Business Bites is a collaborative virtual series hosted by On Its Axis and Haunted House. And if you're not familiar, On Its Axis is an innovation consulting firm based in Southern California, and Haunted House is a flexible co-working space and cafe with locations in both Newport Beach and Palo Alto. Now, our Haunted House workspace locations have been closed for the past 16 months due to the pandemic, but the good news is we have officially announced our return date. So our workspace will open to the public on July 30th. And what's really cool about Haunted House is it is a non-membership based co-working space. Anyone is really allowed to use this space, and it is a pay by the hour model. So there's absolutely no long-term commitment required. Our reservation system will go live here in the next week or so, and you'll be able to start booking workspaces up to 14 days in advance. We have a wide selection of seating options and different prices to kind of cater to your needs. And whether you're based in Northern California or Southern California, you can head to hauntedhouse.com to kind of check out our different locations, see our different seating options, and eventually book your workspace. It's been an incredibly long journey for us over this past year, and we could not be more thrilled to welcome guests back into our space. Now today, I do encourage you all to use the chat feature at the bottom to engage and ask any questions throughout the session. And as a quick starter, maybe we can have everyone go to the chat and just comment where you're tuning in from. We always love seeing where our audience members are coming from. And as a reminder, the session is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we will send it out in a follow-up email within the next week or so. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our amazing moderator today, Kelly from On Its Axis, to welcome our panelists today.
Well, thank you, Colin, and thank you to our speakers and to each of you who've joined us live. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk today with three incredible expert guests on one of my favorite talking points, which is the idea of professional development and the core skills that transcend industry, and particularly with the lens around professional development in an evolving workforce ecosystem. What does that mean? One example that Colin just spoke about was the use of a co-working space during a time when we are forced to shelter in place or quarantine, and there's a pause in the functionality of that business model. How do we plan and work in the professional development as our future of how we work and how we collaborate and what we're working on is shifting? So today, our expert panelists will be tuning in and sharing a bit of information around this really important and exciting topic. I'm going to ask for today's session to start off with a quick introduction, and I'll start with you, Kevin, if you don't mind just sharing with us a little bit about your name and where you're tuning in from and about what you do.
Absolutely, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me on today. My name is Kevin Irvin. I'm currently the Executive Director of Change for Kids in New York City. We create opportunities for kids so that they can overcome inequity. We work with about 5,000 students across the city, really providing a bespoke model of intervention and care for them. We sort of get in where we fit in. What schools and community centers may lack in resources that would really do more than just sort of level the playing field, but really dismantle the playing field so that it's not just fair, but it's just for all. We try to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Dr. Eva Johnson? If you could just share with us a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me this morning. This afternoon, depending on where you're located. I am here in Shreveport, Louisiana. I teach at the LSU, full-time faculty there. I teach in the nonprofit administration master's program. Also, I teach at Liberty University, and I teach in the doctoral program in the Helm School of Government. I also am an entrepreneur of several small businesses. Recently, I launched the Institute for Nonprofit Training and Services. So I'm happy to be here to share whatever I know with you, and so that you can be successful in your endeavor.
Thank you very much. And Michael, will you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Fantastic. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here today. My name is Michael DePass. I am work with the Center for Creative Leadership, and the Center for Creative Leadership is a global leadership development provider, and I work in a group called Societal Advancement that's really focused on providing support to schools, to people who are working on population health issues, nonprofits, and higher education, providing leadership solutions in those spaces that are tailored to the social sector. So I'm glad to be here. I come to that work from over a decade working in school reform as well as international development. So I have kind of a leadership lens that's informed from trying to create change in those contexts.
Thank you so much, Michael. Well, again, everyone, I'm really excited to hear from our speakers directly. And Kevin, I'm going to start with you on this first question as we talk today about this idea of professional development. I'm going to just start and ask you, what does professional development mean to you? And why is it important for our audience to consider it?
Absolutely. Some years ago, I have often been and continue to be a student of leadership and leadership studies and development. And I read a book once that said, "Good leaders grow." And I went to the Hotchkiss School, which their entire motto was to instill a love of learning in us for continued growth. Professional development for me means just that. It means continued growth. If we get to a place in our careers where we believe that we've sort of achieved the 10 out of 10, then we should probably switch gears and go to another career, because there's no more room for growth. There's no more room for learning. Professional development always puts you in the seat of the learner and allows you the opportunity to continue to grow, both in that field and tangential fields around one. I think it's really important for our audience to consider it, because the world is ever changing. We live in this sort of crazy VUCA world, as some folks would refer to it as. And as the world continues to change, we need to change, we need to adapt, we need to evolve, we need to grow.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Eva, I'm going to come to you and would love for you to share your thoughts around professional development, what it means to you, and why you believe it's important for our audience to consider it.
Well, the old saying is that, professional development is one single shot at something. And what I found out during my whole lifetime and my careers is that it's more than just one single thing or process. It's several processes. And what I think we've gotten away from and we need to grow to is different ways of teaching ourselves and teaching others how to perform better. And so I'm more of a targeted, as you will, a targeted, specific, what you would call is learning model. And that learning model would develop over time in several, if you like me, for example, I span several fields, not just one field, but several fields. And I think with not only just your employment, but with volunteering. A lot of my leadership skills I learned from being a commissioner for a city. I had the opportunity to work with nonprofits, 501c3 organizations, elected officials, and that teaches you and gives you more of a basic of where to start, springboard from, and it gives you something where you can impart to others. So imparting that information, as well as the information that I've been, privy to over the years, whether it's academic or professional, is a key. So as Kevin said, learning, I haven't arrived yet. So I'm like Kevin, I haven't arrived yet. And so I'm still learning and still trying to, seek things out and just make it a little bit more easier especially for our students and for our young professionals going forward.
Thank you so much. And I think as I come to you with this question, Michael, we've heard from Eva and Kevin about learning as a theme and evolution, and this idea of professional development as not a stopping point, but something that builds on itself, and it builds on itself from a variety of perspectives and thematic lenses. I'm turning to you now and asking the question, what does professional development mean to you? I'm really asking you to dig in and emphasize on why it's important for our audience to think about this idea of professional development.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate the comments Kevin and Dr. Johnson have shared. What I would add is, I think it depends on whose seat you're sitting in. So from an organizational perspective, those of us who are responsible for others, professional development, often we think about working from the business goals back. So what are the organizational goals? What are we trying to accomplish? And we work back. So certainly that's part of it, and we're responsible for that as leaders. At the same time, it's really important because of the future, because increasingly, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, we're going to span multiple different types of careers, different types of roles. Organizations are going to flatten and consolidate, and all those kind of things are going to be part of our future. We're going to have to learn and unlearn. And that part is, I think why it's important for us as an individual is for us to actually think about professional development as not just development for today and for what I need to do right now, but development that prepares me for where I'm going, and development that's beyond just technical things. So my current role, I might have a technical need. I need to learn how to create a budget. I need to learn how to do. But underneath that, they're enduring things I need to develop, which is to be influential. How do I communicate effectively? How do I bring people along? So I like thinking about both ends of it, the organizational end, which tends to be more narrow, right? But the organization may not give you everything that you need for where you're headed, and you need to take that responsibility on that side. The other thought I had was just the professional is a funny part. I like what Kevin said, that in Dr. Johnson gave examples of volunteering and other things. We're really talking about human development, right? We're really talking about developing who we are as a person. It shows up in a professional way. Our professions may invest in us, but we're really talking about, I think, is taking responsibility for our growth as a person, and that will have benefits professionally as well as in other areas.
This is an incredible concept. The idea of professional development is human development. And as I bring this next question over to you, Eva, I'm going to have that lens. I'm going to ask you to hold that lens of the idea of professional development, shifting from just the work concepts to culture. As you answer the question, has the concept of professional development shifted due to modern workforce changes? So is how we think of professional development changing, or has it already changed due to the evolution of the workplace that Michael was just talking about?
I think it's just starting to change, but we're not there yet. I think we're still stuck in the past, and we have not caught up with the evolution of changing, the workplace changing. Because I think with this whole COVID thing, it just was upon us and nobody knew it was coming. And so you couldn't even prepare for it because we've never experienced anything like this before. And so how do we navigate this new type of professional development, where we used to sit into the classrooms or sitting to an office teaching face-to-face? Now we're doing it online. It takes some of the humanism out of it. However, we know it's necessary for where we are right here in the future. So going forward, what does that look like? I mean, how do we change gears? Are we planning on going back to face-to-face and, you know, developing, you know, our skills in that manner? Or are we going to do it with technology?
Mm.
So it's something that we need to kind of think about and ponder and need to go forward. Now, I know I've had a lot of peers that had to retire for the simple fact that they could not keep up with the technology. Even the learning curve was very, very low when it came to keeping up with all the tools and technology that we need today to even function as leaders. And so how do we bring technology, which is systems, into focus where they're more human? Because we're different parts, but we're human, and we're coming from the same pretty much focus, but everybody's not learning the same, and everybody's not going to be able to do that. We don't want to leave anybody behind. We want everybody to move forward. So the question still becomes, how do we do that, especially in higher education, academia? That's very important from my standpoint, is because we know that we have a lot of students that cannot make that transition.
Mm.
How are they going to make that transition on their jobs? If you can't make it in the classroom, you really truly can't make it in the workplace. So it's some things that we need to, you know, internally kind of discuss and get to the root of how are we going to be able to do this? How are we going to be able to excel in the different areas where we need to excel?
I think that's such an interesting concept that you bring up, Dr. Johnson, is this idea of the responsibility. So not only is the answer yes, that for you, professional development is shifting, but whose responsibility is it to apply this shift as we're in this state of transition, as there's escalating pace of change? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael, as you had started to touch on this question in your last concept. I'm going to ask for you to dig in a little around this idea of professional development and maybe speak to how this is shifting at the organizational side. So how has professional development shifted or due to organizational workforce changes like technology utilization that Dr. Johnson was mentioning?
I think we're just beginning to see what's possible. I think there's been a bias from leadership, professional development providers and users to want to get together face to face for many reasons. So one is the connection. One is also just, most of us lead overly stuffed lives. And so it's easier for us to carve out a block of time, turn things off and learn. At the same time, we know ultimately the future learning is going to be stackable and snackable, and it's going to need to be very different. So in some ways, I think this change has opened up the possibility because our capabilities to access technology platforms are thought about how to integrate kind of more just-in-time drift learning that has the potential for more impact, right? The thing that, you ask what keeps me up at night is oftentimes when we do classroom-based learning kind of in a professional context, people get inundated, absorb it, and there is an application, right? They go back and there's nothing else reinforcing in the organization. So I think organizations now have a new possibility, which is we're all have grown some muscles around using technology platforms, connecting in those ways. And so there's a possibility to actually get more impact, to get more return on the professional development investment by hybrid models, by models that still, find ways to accentuate the human connection, but also allow those skills and capabilities that are being seeded into the organization to actually be nurtured and grown. It's hard to actually learn to do something new. And so we need a fair amount of support, and we've got the capacity now to have that, and also to have learning that is more tailored to people whose learning needs, are not favored by face-to-face, right? So there are people who having time to read and reflect and having space in between sessions really helps them to learn and absorb new material in ways that that really we've just had a bias toward learners who really, learn mainly in an auditory way and love being sitting in a classroom. So I think in many different ways, these capabilities have opened up a lot of possibilities on an organizational level, and we're just beginning to see how organizations are going to take advantage of them.
Thanks so much, Michael. Kevin, as I come to you, we just heard Michael talk about this concept of professional development in a way I love, snackable and stackable, and really touching on the evolution of professional development in content delivery and how this information is being consumed and how people are creating time for it due to the busyness of our lives. I'm handing this over to you and asking for you to talk to us about professional development and how you see the modern workforce shifting this idea.
Absolutely. I think that from the more human development side, thank you, Michael, for that term earlier. I think the possibilities of information are currently endless, right? 10, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have anything from YouTube to masterclass or, the online platforms that we're having now, or the ones that have grown and burst as a result of the pandemic. And I think we're seeing the impact of the shift in the world right now through this sort of great resignation or great reset, whatever folks are referring to it as. And it's not because I don't believe that everyone just sort of sat around for 16 months and said, I hate my job. I think people actually developed over this time in a way that they didn't have the space, place, or opportunity to develop before this, where they actually had time to dig into, becoming a full stack engineer, even though they're a second grade teacher. Because they dreamed about this. It's so much more accessible now, even though they never thought of being a graphic designer because it felt too far, but they could sit and watch these YouTube videos and buy an iPad, and now they're a graphic designer. So I think people are the real crux of the shift here, and access is the cornerstone of that. I think, to what Michael said, organizations have the struggle of now figuring out how do we do this in a way that's responsible to the human and their own individual development. But I think humans are running with it. I think humans have sort of figured out the cheat code here, figured out the secret sauce, and are running with their own development in a way that I think is inspiring, but that I haven't seen, in my short life.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I think one note as I'm listening to the answers come out of this last question, and I find it so fascinating. We heard from Eva about how there are colleagues that she's had and known who didn't make the transition to technology adoption and who have chosen to step out of their existing roles because of that learning curve. And then we've also heard about sort of the opportunity that this technology adoption is creating for others in terms of being able to pursue a new career path or to be able to really thrive in a way they wouldn't have in a traditional learning environment or learning setting. Michael, as we think about this, I'd love for you to speak to some of the benefits of professional development in this new sort of more inclusive version of human development. And if you have an example to share of where professional development created a win, I'd love to be able to hear that and have you share it with our audience.
Okay, absolutely. Wow, there's so many benefits to professional development. Certainly, there's I think the core is a competence to do the task, right? So whatever the role is, obviously professional development can help us to be effective at doing that. At the same time, we most of our work happens in the context with others, with teams and with organizations, with partners. And so professional development is something that can help us to develop, particularly on our blind spots. So I'll just give an example. My first experience at the Center for Creative Leadership, where I currently work, I went as a participant to a program that had a 360. And the 360, I learned some things about myself that I had no idea about. And so that's part of the benefit of, of seeing what we don't see, what we may not already know. So I learned something about how I was leading the team. And so the team basically said, we love a lot of things about this, but there's this one thing, which for me was, I have a big value on participative leadership. And I really wanted to bring them into a lot of decision-making. And it was really overwhelming for them. And for many of them, it was really distracting for them. And so something that I thought was a benefit that I was trying to do that was a good thing, I then, with that information, was able, in support of that program, I was able to then make the adjustment to make sure that they had what they needed. And then I was a little bit more refined in my approach. So I still wanted to involve everyone, but I was able to do it in a smarter way. So that's just a microcosm that there can be, kind of the hard skill side of things. But the example I gave was more on the soft skill side. It was more on the interaction that really allowed me to significantly increase the level of support that they were feeling, their sustainability in the role, as well as me being able to accomplish the objectives that I was inartfully trying to accomplish with the approach I was taking before.
Thanks. It's a wonderful example. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you exactly the same question. Professional development, what are some benefits? And do you have an example of a professional development win you can share with our audience?
I think Michael absolutely hit it on the head. When I think of professional development, I sort of think of, there's sort of two classes. There's the what and the how, the sort of task, and then the introspective. There's a piece of professional development that sort of teaches you what to do or what to think. Here's a task, here's how you do that. And then there's one that's like, here's how you should think about something, and you can, formulate your opinions and thoughts around that. And I think there's a huge benefit to each of those. You get to do the task, you get that task done, you grow that area of skill, or you do a bit more introspection where you're able to grow there. And sort of my example of professional development, I didn't know Michael was on the call today, but mine was also with the Center for Creative Leadership. I oftentimes attribute Lynn Fick Cooper to all of my life success. I was awarded a fellowship to study at CCL for 18 months, many moons ago. And I learned a whole lot about myself, but everything that I have ever developed, I'll say this publicly, everything I've ever developed came out of the crucible that I was in of thought there, right? So I wasn't in CCL learning about youth development work. We weren't talking about anything for young people, but we were talking about work that was associated with me and my own growth and the professional growth and personal growth of those in my cohort. And that just kept the wheels turning, the growth wheels, so that I could continue to think about the work that I was doing and grow the work that I was doing and grow the skills that I had for staff and for students alike. So every bit of anything I've done, in the last X amount of years, I attribute to that, year and a half professional development experience.
Well, that is a wonderful small world connection. And thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you exactly the same question, Eva. What are some benefits of professional development? And do you have an example, perhaps with CCL, that you can share with our audience? You're currently muted. We will perhaps come back to Dr. Johnson in just a moment. I think that she might have conflict.
Yeah, okay, I'm back. I had a little 6-year-old bouncing around, so I didn't want him to bounce around. So professional development, I think I bring it down to a personal level. Those that want to excel will take advantage of professional development without having to be paid for it or having to have it mandated, but it's a personal thing that you want to do to better yourself. A couple of examples that I could give, but the one that sticks out to me is teaching online. Of course, the virtual classroom is very important these days. All the universities have gone to this format just because of the COVID. Well, in that particular arena, they have something that's called Quality Matters, and they call it QM, and it's a certification for online instructors. If you are able to go through these workshops and complete these workshops, you're giving a certification saying that you are a professional at the highest level teaching in online courses. Some universities will send their staff through. Some of them won't, because it does cost money. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to engage this particular workshop, because it's important for the future generation, because we all know that what online is where it is. It's not going to go back. I don't think online it's growing. And so what happened when I first was made aware of this QM, I was asked to develop an online course in a master's program. And they wanted to have that course certified. And the only way they could get it certified was through that Quality Matters process. So I was tasked with that particular duties of developing this online course. And lo and behold, I didn't know anything about QM at the time, but after working with their team, I was able to get that particular course certified. So that was like a couple years ago. Then fast forward, if you look at a lot of the advertisement in higher education, they want you to have that QM certification in order to teach. Some universities have to catch up. They're not there yet, but they will be there. And so what happened was I took it upon myself to go through those 7 workshops and get certified and credentialed in online teaching. That professional development, those workshops led to me being able to develop more courses in higher education and to be able to develop my own online courses for my institute. And I thought that was just fantastic. But it was some work. I had to put some work into it. It was some studying, and the workshops were not easy. They were graded. I was a student, and I just loved it. And I'm going to continue on with that. Every time that there's a new workshop or professional development that they offer, I'm more than happy to engage and be in there and learn whatever I can, because this is going to be where we're going to go from going forward. So it's going to put me in a position to be able to compete when we get there to that particular point. So I would encourage anyone, professional development in your field of study. That wasn't particularly in my field of study, but it's what I do now. I'm teaching, I'm a professor online and in the classroom. So that's going to help me either way, it doesn't matter. So it's a benefit.
That's great. Well, I'm going to just call out the synchronicity between the panel and in this answer for our audience, and just emphasize that concept that Kevin shared with this idea of the how and the what. That professional development itself may have one purpose or intention in the moment that you sign up for it. It may be something that you sign up for because your employer is encouraging it. It may be something that you select because you think it's going to create an answer for you. But as you engage in professional development today, you are creating a path for a new you for tomorrow. You're creating a new opportunity with these newly added skills that may be able to be applied in a vastly different way. Dr. Johnson gave us one example of that, where she was asked to do something in this credentialing process for a very specific task that now has become part of a side hustle career, not only her online teaching and development, but the development of an entire startup around this nonprofit consulting space that she's working in. Kevin gave the example of this fellowship opportunity, creating transformational aspects in how he leads and how he works and how he does his job, although that wasn't the nature of the professional development. And so Kevin, coming back to you, as we're moving to our next question, I'd love to just have you share, knowing this transition, knowing professional development matters, What's your top tip for our audience as they think about and their why for professional development, and they think about this concept of professional development for future of work?
A top tip. I have so many tips. My top tip would probably be to be hungry. Be hungry consistently. I think Dr. Johnson put it excellently when she said, I haven't arrived. If you always stay in that space of, I haven't arrived and there's more food to eat, there's more to digest, there's more to learn, you'll always be in a space where you will grow, your knowledge will grow, your space will grow, your circle will grow. There will just be consistent growth around you. But once you lose that hunger, you start to starve. If we talk about it from a synonymous physical place, you lose your hunger, you stop eating, you start to starve yourself of the knowledge and the growth that's necessary for your continued excellence or pursuit of excellence. So definitely be hungry.
Thanks, Kevin. Eva, what's your top tip for our audience? I'm sorry, you're muted again.
I agree with Kevin wholeheartedly, is that when you stop craving for more information, then you really stop growing. What I've learned is I try to dabble in a lot of stuff. I watch the History Channel, National Geographic, I watch about whales. I mean, just a plethora of things that will help me. I don't know why they'll help me, but they'll help me. I'm like, why am I so fascinated on this particular thing right here? Well, it's because something I didn't know. I didn't know it. And so now I can go into a conversation if somebody's talking about whales or if somebody's talking about history, and I can engage that. So absolutely, I come back to, it's a personal decision, but it's a good one. So if you keep going forward and looking at it, not at something that is dreary or something that, shoot, I have to do, but something that I want to do because I want to better myself, you all the better for it.
I love this. So be hungry, be curious. Michael, as I'm coming to you, I'd love to ask you exactly the same question.
All right, well, I think I want to just build on those two comments and say, to me, the top tip is to separate training events from the idea of professional development. So it's a nice connection with the prior comments about being hungry and being curious. But I think Colin put something in the chat that's really important, which is also CCL's research kind of bears out, which is we did expansive research of leaders talking about what were the most important formative kind of growth experiences they had. And 70% of those were on the job. 20% were developmental relationships, mentors, peers, and then 10% was classroom. And so that's a challenge, challenging numbers. I think the trick is to link some of those things. So we all have lots of experience on the job, and that doesn't mean we're necessarily growing professionally. The question is, though, can we use, with intention, can we use our real world experience? And so I think the really under leveraged part is our actual real experience. We tend to think about, I want to go to this course, I want to do this thing. And so, for example, in the last 4 months, I've been working on being a better team leader. And so I have a particular project where I've found an approach that's kind of a template for me, and I'm working the approach, I'm asking for feedback. I'm professionally developing my abilities around a part of team leadership that's not really intuitive to me, and I don't feel like I do well. And that to me is more where the game is, right? Where the game's going is self-directed leadership, where we're using developmental relationships. We might get some expertise, right? From an article, from a book, from a person, but we're really using it, we're getting the feedback loop, and we're getting better. So that way, it's endless, what our development potential is. We think about it as a course, we can say, well, my organization won't send me, I don't have the money to do this. It's a very limiting view of professional development. if we look around in our actual work, in the resources around us, who's good at something around you, right? What are your colleagues good at that you'd like to get better at? Now we get into a completely different game, right? Where it's rich for professional development. It can happen all the time. It's not dependent on someone else deciding that we need something. It's really self-directed.
I love the way that comment builds on Dr. Johnson's comment about how she learns in so many different places, that she watches the History Channel and she learns about whales, and now she's prepared to connect with people, which creates around this topic of whales, which creates new conversation and new opportunities. This idea of professional development as snowballing, the idea of professional development as creating a platform that takes you down these sort of new and evolving paths with each new kind of idea that you consume, using the hunger theme. So as we're consuming these new variations, we're able to make new rapid connections, and we can do that in ways that aren't necessarily hierarchical. They're not necessarily just about a degree pursuit path. And that's a concept I want to come back to, because it's been touched on at a very high level by each of you, as sort of the evolution of how we learn. And professional development is naturally being tied to this idea of learning. And we have this idea of these sort of micro courses. We've had this idea about online learning. But what do each of you think about in terms of career? And there are many student learners who are joining our call, about hands-on learning and hybrid learning, and how the role that will play in career pathing and future professional development. And Kevin, I'm going to shift that one up to you first, if you don't mind.
Sure. Can you just repeat the last couple of words you said?
Sure. So these new ways of learning, these kind of new concepts, there's sort of a departure from a classic kind of K through 12 and then post kind of graduate learning environment in a very kind of stackable linear way. And there's this sort of, we'll call the buffet, to keep with your theme, of being able to learn in a variety of different ways, including sort of peer learning or experiential learning or hybrid learning. How do you think that's going to affect the future of professional development, this shift, and where do we think it's going in terms of career development?
Absolutely. So I think that I'm a firm believer that all things that were become again. There's really nothing new under the sun. And if we think back to the Greek groves, and we think about the Socratic method, and we think about folks under trees just continuously asking why, and then gaining information in that way. No one questions why Socrates was so important and intelligent, even though he didn't sit in a classroom for 15 years of his life or 18 years of his life. I think we're getting back to a space and place where folks are looking at some of the great thought leaders in our time and understanding that there was this duality between traditional education and then more sort of laissez-faire approach to their own development. I think it will shift organizations' thoughts around their intentionality with, water jug conversations, their intentionality as leaders with what they're talking about when it's not task related or just sort of, on your coaching sheet that we have to tick these boxes here. What do we have conversations about in our passing by in the workplace? And then, just like Dr. Johnson said, I think it will start to grow in the own individual's pursuit of knowledge in various areas. I myself am a student of leadership, but I'm also attending Berklee College of Music this fall because I play 7 instruments and I read and write music. And I said, I don't think that I'm gonna end up being P. Diddy, but I really want to learn more about this particular subject, and why not be in their inaugural master's program where I can expand that knowledge. And their entire philosophy here is being together with other folks who are doing this work and learning in that sort of peer space, which was very interesting to me, that it wasn't very linear and sort of, these are our courses and this what happens. It's like, hey, there's 20 of you guys, You guys are gonna do this together and figure this thing out together because you've done some of this work already. And I think that both traditional education and professional development are really moving in that direction.
Well, congratulations on your upcoming studies. It sounds incredible. I saw both Michael and Dr. Johnson nodding along. Are there any thoughts that either of you would like to share just to follow up on that last question? We do have an audience question that came in as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to, Kelly, I'd like to just say that I totally agree with Kevin and what I see taking place in what I do in my classroom is I do more practical application. Theory is good and theory has its place, but at a master's level where I teach, there's no time. You need to know exactly what it takes in order to be a leader and a manager. You cannot waste time, and even theory is good, and I do teach theory, but that's not, I want to see how you can perform. How can you perform this as a leader on a job? How do you lead people? I mean, how are you able to make your organization work for you? It's a totally different. And so what I try to do is I try to bring my own professional experience in the classroom, and a lot of our professors don't have that. They have book knowledge, but I'm a practitioner in the field. So it's a little bit different when you're a practitioner in the field than you're just, regular teacher. So I bring a little bit of difference in there, and I like it. So I want to see more professional development included in higher education. It can be done. We can incorporate it. It's not hard to do.
I love this. Michael, I'm going to come to you with a new question, if you're okay with that, and you can
Sure.
feel free to add any thoughts you'd like to the last question. But just you shared quite a bit during today's conversation around how you've evolved as a leader, and around your personal effort to help create an improvement in how you're received as a leader. And so I'm going to ask the question that a member of our audience asked, which is, what risks have you taken as a leader? And how meaningful has that been for your professional development?
I love that question. Yeah, I would say that the most of the time that the most growth for me has been the times where I've taken the most risk. And, some people write about this as, kind of learning in a crucible, right? When we're in those situations that really have our attention, right? And we know that we can't be on autopilot because the challenge is great enough to kind of wake us up. So I think specifically when I was a turnaround leader in a school, and it was the challenges were immense, but there was a lot of support, and so I had the chance to try things. The feedback loop was pretty fast. A lot of times the feedback loop is quite long for us in standard kind of parts of our work that are sort of habituated, but in situations that are maybe high profile in some way, or we're doing something that we've never done before, the feedback loop can be fast, and so the learning can be fast. And I think the key to those things is thinking about support, is thinking about when we say yes and put ourselves out there, there's nothing like that, but thinking about the range of support. What kind of supports do we need? So whether that's expertise, what kind of support do we need in our own emotional life to be able to manage those risks? What kind of supports do we need in terms of thinking space and thought partnership? There may not be expertise space, right? But there are people we can go to and make sense of what's happening. Because if we're really putting ourselves in an area where it's unknown for us in some ways, we're going to need help managing that if we're going to be successful and learn. So we want to kind of lead with both those things, right? We want to be successful, but even if we're not successful, we want to learn. So I look back at that experience and I think so many things, I love what Kevin said before. I have lived out of so many insights when kind of pushed to the max in those kind of high risk, but high risk, high support contexts that I've been in.
Great answer. We have actually a number of additional questions, so I'm going to jump in just our last few minutes on the next question, which is to ask each of you, and Eva, I'm going to come to you first. Do you have a resource recommendation or good read for professional development? So if you would rather add something to the chat after you've had a chance to think about it, we can also have you do that if you want a moment to think about making a resource recommendation.
Well, there's so many, Kelly. There's so many out there. I mean, it's like just like a one size fits all. But let me. I have so many. Let me think about a resource that would really be, I'd like to say, practitioner based.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give something that's practitioner based. I'm not quite sure if I have anything right off the bat, but you need something that teaches you exactly what you need to know, hands on, just hands down. You just need to know that, and that's with any tool. I have so many students that's difficulty with writing and things like that, and so I think that just starts from the elementary school all the way up. And we see it very clearly when we get up to my level, that there were some things missing that we could have done, me included. I'm putting, for our kids, K-12 and all the way up, to help them navigate this thing called life and this thing called learning and being a leader and an entrepreneur. So it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint one thing, but just let me think about that, and I think I'll put something in the chat about that.
Perfect. And I will share that in the chat, I received a book recommendation that I personally haven't read, but it came from a member of our audience, and that is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. So I'm going to add this in. Just know that this is not my recommendation. I haven't personally read this yet. But it did come from our audience as a suggestion, and I'm happy to share. The audience member was not David Epstein. It was not a self-promotion. I also saw that one of our panelists added a book I actually have had the opportunity to read, and do highly encourage everybody to have a chance to read. And that came from Michael to the entire group. So thank you, Michael, for sharing 7 Transformations of a Leader by Bill Tolbert. Kevin, I'll also give you the opportunity to share within the chat if you'd like, because we received one more question, and I'm going to allow this to be the final question from the team, which is just in regards to professional development. Have you uncovered any insights related to people managing skills as opposed to hard skills like coding or design? I'm going to repeat that one because I think that this is a really important concept. So when thinking about professional development, have you found any insights related to people managing skills, or what we'll refer to broadly as the soft skills or the connective skills, as opposed to hard skills like coding, design, or guitar? And so Kevin, I'm coming your way.
Absolutely. So the one sort of caveat that I have, a few years ago, I was sitting with a principal, elementary school principal, and I was asking her how her building was so structured. And she shared with me that people do what is inspected, not what is expected. And it rattled me a little bit at that moment, because I don't believe that. And she walked around the building and she sort of was like, see, all of this stuff is structured and wonderful because I walk around a lot, because I look at people a lot and I observe them a lot. And I thought back to when I had my first job ever, which was as a camp counselor at a sleepaway camp. And I thought back to my first leadership position, which was also at that camp, and how I had 8 staff members who were taking care of 64 campers who had, the lives of campers in their hands for 19 days. And children had amazing experiences and staff had amazing experiences. And I tried to wonder how it was that I couldn't inspect them all on 250 acres, yet they did above and beyond what was expected. And in that moment, I came to the conclusion that people actually do what they believe. And if we can inspire belief at the onset, if we can inspire this belief in the work, in the job, in themselves, in the constituents from a very early onset, people will go above and beyond expectation every single time. And when you don't have that belief, then you have to be inspected, because then you're just working to work. You're working for inspection and not for your own expectation and above that.
Absolutely love this. And I was going to go around to everybody and give you each the opportunity to chime in on this one. But just in the interest of time, I want to take a quick pause and really think about what Kevin just shared there, because I think it's really powerful. This is the crux of what we've been talking about in today's professional development conversation. We've been talking about a classic professional development model that says we're building towards something, we achieve a pinnacle, a credential, a degree, a level of expertise in that category, and oftentimes the growth and development tapers off. And it creates what Dr. Johnson mentioned, which becomes a knowledge gap or a skills gap that can be challenging in an ever-changing world. That inspection yields results is really tied to that classic model. Today's model and what we've been talking about instead is about inspiring the results that we want to see achieved and creating fluidity and flexibility in both the path itself and the rewards associated with that path. And so thank you to each of our panelists for a really incredible and insightful conversation. You volunteered your time here today, hadn't previously connected, and yet you built on each other's ideas as if you'd been working together for a long time. And I think it's a great example of your commitment to continuous growth and to that second model as individual leaders. And so thank you all very much. With that, please do feel free to share your final thoughts or parting thoughts in chat, but I'm going to hand it back over to Colin to wrap up our conversation. Colin?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And thank you again to all of our panelists, Eva, Michael, Kevin, you guys were awesome. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with us. I think, the conversation was super insightful the entire time. The engagement was great. The questions we had were great. And I think it was an incredibly valuable session overall for everyone who tuned in. I will be dropping a feedback survey in the chat right now. So please feel free to take a moment to fill that out. It will help us improve future sessions. So let me go ahead and drop it in right there. And our next Business Bites will be coming up in August. So be on the lookout for the registration link and our follow-up email along with the replay link to this session. And with that, have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you all